Hello and welcome to the Lean Girl Fitcast, your place for mindset and motivation mastery on your fitness and fat loss journey. My name is Angie. You may know me as the Lean Girl on Instagram, and I'm super passionate about the practical science of how to lose fat. But what I've realized is there's this massive gap between knowing what to do, so I can give you the tool, I can give you the knowledge, and actually us taking action, right? And so that is what this podcast is about, giving you the practical mindset tools that are going to help you shift from knowing into doing. And so I'm joined here by my hunky husband, Gilan Gork, expert mentalist who presents around the world on how to find success without suffering. And so he is sharing his brilliant psychological and mindfulness tools with us here, and we are applying that to our fat loss and fitness journey. And so this is actually part 3 in a 3-part episode, in a 3-part series, where we have been unpacking how to really detach our happiness from an ideal body or an ideal weight. And so the process that we've been through so far is firstly creating a perspective shift. So how do we see this differently? And when we do start to deconstruct it, it is very easily seen to be crazy that we are attaching our happiness to a specific goal. And then in part 2, we spoke about a practical tool that we can use when we stand on the scale, when we see that photo on holiday and we're unhappy with how we look, or when we look in the mirror, and how do we start retraining our minds and really finding happiness within and along the journey. And so natural question that we had was, okay, but how do we have a goal? Perhaps you do have a bit of weight to lose. Perhaps there is a goal that we need to achieve to be happier and healthier and be our best versions. So how do we actually move toward that from a place of wholeness and happiness and inspiration versus self-hate, desperation, misery,
and a place of lack?
Right. Is that possible?
Yeah. I mean, so, in episode 1 and 2, we were talking about how it is desire. It is the incessant seeking that is causing us to obscure the inner happiness and joy and peace that's already within us, right? And we go more into that, deeper into that in episode 1 and 2. So if you haven't watched that, I highly recommend it. And so the question then is, well, then it seems that if I have any desire, that's going to cause me unhappiness. So how do I stay motivated? How do I stay consistent?
Right.
And kind of get this apparent contradiction to live in the same place.
Because when it just to a note on that, so when it comes down to, body positivity, people can talk about, just accepting yourself as it is and having no desiring, that's not what we're talking about, right? Here we're talking about how to still want to change. It's not just about not having goals.
Yeah.
Right?
So, I mean, I would say that it's not about toxic body positivity. Let's talk about the ego. And the ego is really what causes a lot of our suffering, right? And so let's maybe just talk a bit about what the ego is. And the ego is something that we know is not our real selves. I mean, we all have expressions like leave your ego at the door. It's like an ego is like this extra thing that sometimes we're wearing, and sometimes we've got to hang it up at the door when we come in. And normally we know that we need to get rid of our ego. We think that because it causes a lot of suffering for us. And so we haven't really thought, like, what actually is this thing called the ego, right?
Right.
If we inspect the ego, what we find is that the ego is a version of ourselves. I'm really simplifying things here, but to make it practical. The ego is a version of ourselves which has got all of these preferences and conditions in order to feel okay inside, in order to feel happiness, in order to feel peace. And because it's got all of these preferences, these likes and dislikes, these fears and desires, it causes us to then be seeking things like happiness outside of ourselves, or resisting and avoiding things that we think are going to make us unhappy. And so whenever we're feeling that sense of seeking and avoiding and that turbulence, so the way that obscures our innate happiness that we spoke about in episode 1 and 2, we know that is something that is coming from the ego.
Right.
And so we went in episode 2 of like, well, how do you actually let that go? And in letting go of that seeking and resisting, we're actually letting go of of our ego.
Mm-hmm.
And so what then happens if we're letting go of seeking and resisting? What happens in us? Do we feel that we need to that we're going to be so complacent and just apathetic towards life, like have no care? We actually land up not doing anything. We totally lose control of our health and everything. And the answer is no.
Hell no. I can really relate to that on my journey of having many years where there were various goals that I was seeking, from being really skinny to having a certain number on the scale. Now I wanted more muscle. Now I wanted abs. And definitely moving from a place of like I needed to achieve this so that I could be okay. And how I've shifted over the years, and I think a lot of practical things from you that we've both been learning and discovering in terms of mindfulness, how much more excited I am now on my fitness journey. Like I love my workouts. Like I feel like there's no other way to say it, but like it's a celebration of things that I get to do, that I get to show up at the gym, that I love to make a healthy meal. And it's not now all of a sudden I have no motivation, lack, or drive. It's actually much the opposite.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, if I told you that if we could, if we removed all this seeking of things to make us feel okay inside, or this resisting or anything like that, and allowed your true joy and peace that's already inside of you, that happiness to shine through, the feeling that you would have would not be to curl up in your bed and to disconnect from the world. You'd actually feel energized, right? You'd feel like full of love, and you'd feel completeness. And so that source of motivation shifts from a sense of lack, a sense of trying to chase happiness in some external thing, which, like we explored in previous episodes, is a delusion. We may get temporary relief when we get that thing, and then we cease resisting and seeking. And then we land up getting unhappy again because we obscure our happiness by the next thing that we're resisting or seeking. And so that sense, when we get rid of that, we now feel energized. We come from a place of fullness, of completeness, and we actually get this new sense of motivation and energy. And so now it's not, maybe your actual goal changes. It's possible, right? That we say to ourselves, well, like for me personally, right? I went through a phase where I was just trying to put on muscle. I thought I had to be this chiseled whatnot, right? And that would somehow make me happy. And I got really lean. I actually got really chiseled. I had the six pack and the everything. And I'm like, woke up one day like, well, why am I not happy anymore? Like what? So what lands up happening is, like, now I'm focused on longevity.
Right.
Now I love my body, and I've been destroying it with all of that hectic, like really, I've got like problems with my knees from those heavy squat. Like it's a problem. So actually, coming from a place of fullness now, my goal has changed. Now, this is a very scary thing for our ego.
Right.
Because remember that our ego, as it is right now, almost has a certain identity. It's given us, we often identify as being the ego, right? And our ego is this network of preferences and conditions. So right now, as you are, right? Well, let me speak to all of you who are either watching or listening. Right now, as you are, your ego has got certain preferences, got certain conditions, things that you want to be a certain way. You want to look a certain way, you want to be a certain type of person, whatever those things are. And so sometimes it's difficult in that state to think that perhaps there's a different kind of goal that would give you that same sense of fulfillment. Like we become attached to a certain, our ego makes us be attached to a certain image of ourselves, or we have to be a certain way in, and when we reach that, then we will feel okay inside. And so it's almost scary. That becomes so part of our identity, we become scared to let it go. So we think to ourselves, well, if I feel totally okay inside, maybe I'm gonna like let myself go. And so we think to ourselves, well, what's gonna happen? It's the unknown. We think to ourselves, it's a scary place to be.
And I think for people that have been chasing that their whole lives, that has become who they are, and even as you said, once you've achieved the goal, like I could definitely relate to that from, being on social media, and there could definitely be a pressure to say, okay, well, Ange has to be the perfect model, she has to look a certain way. And then I can start thinking that that's, something that I have to live up to. And if I don't, then I'm not going to be okay. And no one's going to love me. And no one's going to accept me. Where in reality, that's
That's the ego that has created this identity, right?
Right.
But actually, that identity is just a bunch of preferences and conditions, because we have been conditioned our whole lives into thinking that we need to be a certain way or do, seeking and resisting. And then when we get that, we will then be loved and accepted. We'll find that happiness. So I understand. I totally get it. It's like, we think that we're giving up our identity, and it's maybe a little bit scary, and we think to ourselves, well, I feel so connected to that seeking and desiring. Like, who am I if I'm not? And so what I'm inviting you to really consider is that, what is this role of seeking and desiring? What has it done to you? It has obscured that innate, that peace and happiness that you were born with, that is the natural state of your being, right? And so when you're just being without all the seeking and resisting, you're going to feel that feeling tone of peace and happiness. And then we obscure it with the chase or the avoiding. And so I want to give you the confidence that when you have the courage to let go of your ego, to let go of all those conditions, you're going to feel such a beautiful energy and centeredness and sense of peace that it'll energize you, and whatever your goals are is not coming from a place of ego and from a place of lack. It's coming from a place of love.
And being okay, as we mentioned, for those goals to perhaps change. So maybe it's not the shredded abs that you're after, or the giant booty, or whatever it may be. And sure, that can feel a little weird, especially if that's something you've been chasing for a really long time. But, something that we've also spoken about, babe, is when you almost shift so much of the focus from yourself, what you look like, what everyone's going to think about you, and you actually start thinking about, what kind of contribution can I make here? And I think that's actually been a key shift for me. And when I focus less on myself, what I look like, and I'm thinking about like my goals, how can I contribute? How can I show up with my best energy? That means I need to feel myself. How can I be the best role model for them and actually practice what I preach, right? I can't be teaching you to be like this and actually back at the ranch at home, I'm doing something else.
Yeah, look, I think this is one of the reasons why you're so successful in life, in all areas of your life, because you have gotten to a place where you feel like you're not lacking. When we feel like we need something, like we're lacking, we go out there, we're just waiting for that compliment. We're just waiting to like feel that we look in the mirror and we look okay. Like, we're always needing to fill ourselves up. And it's difficult to actually be contributing and overflowing into others and into our work and doing our most inspired work when we're in a place of lack. So you will land up having goals and acting from a place of love, and it's going to be in service of you being full and bringing your best self, and you're going to start being able to contribute more to things outside of yourself. So
yeah, I mean, whether that's with your family, whether that's in your career, it's almost like as soon as you turn your, I guess it's not a visual thing, but as soon as you turn your focus on away from just you and what your physical appearance is or whatever, and you do focus on other people, there's a softening that happens around.
Not even just focusing on other people, also focusing on yourself. So now your goals will be to be whatever it is from a place of love. And maybe it is to still look a certain way or to be healthy or longevity, but you're no longer going to those extremes. You're no longer driven to those extremes because you already feel good inside. And so it comes from a place of self-care and not from a place of lack or self-criticism.
Or like, I need to change myself to be okay.
Yeah.
So I really love that. And I think it's such an important shift that we can all work on making, coming from this place of wholeness and inspiration and energy and self-love. So I think that this so beautifully wraps up our third and final part. And I really do encourage you, if you haven't watched episode or listened to episode 1 and 2, to go and visit those. And I really hope that you're walking away with some really practical, not only tools, but some food for thought as well, to really get our minds thinking differently around how to enjoy and really level up and be our best selves, but in a way that is enjoyable and in a way that we can find peace and joy along this journey. So that wraps it up for episode 3. And episode 4, we spoke a little bit about consistency here, and consistency is one of those things that without it, doesn't matter how good your strategy is, if we're not implementing it consistently, there's no way we're going to get results. So we are going to be talking about that Friday night moment when you want to reach for the pizza like you've done for the last week, the week before that, even though you are so desperately wanting to make a change, we are going to give you some practical tools on how to tackle those moments and really move forward and move you closer toward those goals. So thank you for tuning into the episode. If you loved it, leave us a comment, leave us a review. If you want to hear more from Gilan, check him out on Instagram at gilan.cork. And of course, The Lean Girl at The Lean Girl on Instagram. If you need some more practical science, fat loss, recipes, it's all there. Go and check it out. Thanks for tuning in. And we will see you in the next episode.